Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 2, Episode 37. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. This week we discuss the fact that inflation is indeed bullshit. The political ads that you see over and over again are in fact for the donors. They are not for you, dear listener, nor are they for any of your countrymen. And yes, Tennessee fanboy gets to take his victory lap. Tennessee beats Alabama 52-49. Thank you all for your continued support. I appreciate all of the attention that you're giving this windbag. I would appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, write a review, thumbs up, distribute, do the things that the people do on the social medias to help promote the podcast. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting. Now, the feature presentation.
Act 1. Inflation is bullshit.
You may or may not have come to this conclusion, dear listener, but inflation is bullshit. I've wanted to do a piece on inflation for a while now. I've had a number of different concepts, a number of different approaches. I've actually recorded some things. I really never liked the way they turned out, and I wasn't really comfortable with my approach. I'm no expert on economics. I'm no expert on the bond market. I'm no expert in finance. And the way inflation is presented to us, it's almost as if the media, the government, the politicians, economists, they're all singing a different verse of the same song. And that song is, "Dear American consumer, this is an extremely complicated issue that you don't quite understand, and it would take way too much time to try to explain it to you. And even if we did take that time to explain it to you, you probably still wouldn't understand, because that's just how complex, that's just how complicated this issue of inflation is. So, trust in us. Trust that we are guiding the ship properly to get you through these dire straits of inflation." One of the reasons why I feel that I did not like the pieces that I had done on inflation, I didn't like the concepts, I didn't like the approaches, I didn't like what I was saying, is because I was actually feeding into that narrative, that it's extremely complex, I had to do research, I had to be able to cover all of these angles. And in my attempts to do so, it just didn't sound right. It didn't sound like me. It didn't feel right. I didn't resonate with it. And I now understand that this whole concept, that the basic concept that inflation is extremely complicated, is absolute and total bullshit. Inflation is total bullshit. Now, I understand the concept of inflation. I understand that inflation is real, but inflation as it has been presented to us as the American consumer is bullshit. A situation that I encountered this very week made that clear to me. As I state over and over again, the truth sits right in front of our face. Very often we're looking around the truth to reach, to find, to land on, to arrive at the lie that we want to believe. We actually have to do work. We have to expend energy in order to reach the lie, whereas the truth, it just sits there right in front of us. What happened to me, dear listener? I wanted to book an airline ticket. I wanted to book an airline ticket to the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. I live in the city of Phoenix, Arizona. If one looks on a map, those two cities aren't far apart. Those cities are close enough where, if one were so inclined, one could drive from Phoenix to Las Vegas, and many people do. I, after having quite a weekend in one Las Vegas, Nevada, years and years ago, pledged to myself, you'll never do this again. Now, of course, I did do it again and again, but I had pledged to myself that I would never do it again because I made one of the biggest mistakes that anybody can make in going to Las Vegas, Nevada. I drove there. Now, as bad as one might feel on a Sunday or a Monday, having been in Vegas for 3 or 4 or, God forbid, 5 days, you feel even worse when you were faced with the prospect of having to drive home from Las Vegas, Nevada. So driving is not an option for me. In researching the airline tickets to go to one Las Vegas, Nevada, I went to the Southwest, I went to the American, I went to the Frontier, I went to a number of airlines. I started with Southwest. Southwest has a hub in Phoenix, Arizona. To book a flight in the 3rd week of October for a destination in the 1st week of December, that destination being Las Vegas, Nevada, from Phoenix, Arizona, $656. $656 fucking dollars. My mind immediately went to a lot of the propaganda, a lot of the narrative from the media about Southwest, that they had all the problems with the pilots and not wanting to take the COVID vaccine, that they had all the problems with their airline staff, that they too, like many airlines, used the stimulus money that they got during the COVID pandemic to let go of staff, to let go of pilots, to let go of flight attendants. They then, after culling their entire staff, took the stimulus money and did stock buybacks. So I thought, okay, this is a Southwest issue. I go then to the American Airlines. American Airlines also has a hub in Phoenix, Arizona. These are the 2 biggest carriers that fly out of Phoenix. I'm going to be able to find a decent fare between the 2 of them. $597 to fly from Phoenix, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada and back, purchasing the ticket more than 6 weeks in advance. American Airlines wants to charge me not even good times, not the ideal times to fly back and forth. $597 fucking dollars. I went down the airlines. The only one that I could find that had a decent fare had terrible times, and it wasn't even from the airport that's closest. It's one of those satellite airports. It's one of those, what the industry calls rebate, but what really are cut rate carriers. Now, let's quickly take an aside, and let's try to put in perspective some of the things that we've been told by the powers that be about inflation, whether that be politicians, whether that be other government bureaucrats, whether that be the media, whether that be economists, whether that be people who are instrumental in our financial industry. COVID. COVID is one of the major culprits of the current inflationary paradigm, the current inflationary climate. Paired with COVID, the supply chain issue, the fact that we have very delicate, very fragile supply chains, and they were impacted by COVID, and we're still in that reverberation of getting the supply chain shortages worked out. Good old Joe Biden and his really clever, his catchy turns of phrase, Putin's price hike. It's the war in Ukraine that's causing the inflation. Let's look at those in turn. Do I believe that COVID played a part in the inflationary climate that we're currently in? Sure. Do I believe that the supply chain fragility played a part in the current inflationary climate? Of course. Do I believe that a war in one of the largest grain-producing nations on planet Earth caused inflation? Yes, I do. Do I believe that the sanctions, which I've spoken about on this very podcast, that were placed on Russia because of that war, which have been completely ineffective, which have actually caused a spike in energy prices around the world, do I believe that that is contributing to the inflationary climate? Of course. Why don't we parse out in percentages the contribution of those elements? Let's see. COVID, 1%. Supply chain, 1%. The war in Ukraine, 1%. And our sanctions on Russia spiking energy prices, 1%. That's 4%. Can you count it up, dear listener? 1. And then one more than 1, that's 2. And then 1 more than 2, that's 3. And then one more than 3, that's 4. What accounts for the other 96%? These fucking corporations jacking up their prices. Now let's go back to reality. Let's get back to the situation at hand that led me to this epiphany. There is no way in hell that a flight from Phoenix, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada, a 45 to 50 minute flight, costs $656. The carriers are using inflation as an excuse to rip off the consumer. That's the reason why we have such high prices. And I want us to look at this, all of us, from below instead of above. I'm not saying this in judgment. I came to this epiphany, and I think this is an epiphany for all of us to realize inflation is bullshit. Look at all of the other inflationary periods in the course of human history. All we've been taught is that it is this out of control monster, and that if you don't have these very heavy-handed fiscal policies that are exercised by central banks, inflation will run rampant and we will all be in this economic purgatory. Dear listener, it's bullshit. One of the things that has led to these grossly inflationary periods is that corporations, seeing inflation on the horizon, immediately jack up their prices to try to rake in as much profit as possible before we go into a recession. They see the central banks raising the interest rates and they say, we need to garner, we need to amass, we need to compile as much money as humanly possible before we go into this recessionary period so that we can ride it out. I think this fiscal phenomenon has gone on for decades, if not hundreds of years. As the Federal Reserve has on numerous occasions admitted, and I believe the gentleman's name is Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, none of the tools that can be exercised by the Federal Reserve are going to deal with supply chain issues, are going to deal with the issues that were created by COVID, are going to deal with the war in Ukraine, are going to deal with the spike in energy prices. The only way that the Federal Reserve can slow down the rise of inflation is to slow down consumption. And the only way that they can slow down consumption is to basically make buying things so expensive that the U.S. consumer decides not to buy, that the U.S. consumer's dollar does not go as far. The corporations that are charging us, they look at this as an opportunity because they can then blamelessly jack up their prices and just say, well, it's on account of inflation. The last time the United States of America was in this type of inflationary climate, it was the late 70s and Jimmy Carter was president. And I truly believe that consistent with what was happening then to what is happening now, the huge spike in energy prices, the huge spike in the cost of consumer goods, everyone looked at the climate and said, let's just rape them. Let's charge as much as we possibly can in this climate, garner as much money as we can to ride out what will be the recession that comes because the Federal Reserve in the United States is continuing to raise interest rates. There's no great mystery. This is just a guy pulling levers behind a curtain. This is the Wizard of Oz. The public is being sold. We're living in an inflationary climate. The companies that sell us our goods and services jack up the prices to make as much money as they possibly can. We see this prophecy being fulfilled, and the Federal Reserve drives us into a recession because that's the only tool that they have to combat the inflationary climate. It's that simple. So as much as we might be upset at what's going on today, oh, these corporations are so greedy, again, is this not a mirror into what has possibly happened over the course of centuries when it comes to inflation? The fact that you aren't really hearing in the mainstream or the legacy media the fact that it's not inflation necessarily that's driving up these prices, it's that corporations are using it as an opportunity to jack up their prices, to charge us outrageous prices. Perhaps, dear listener, it's always been this way. Perhaps, dear listener, this is an opportunity for us to learn for us to see the reality, the truth of it, and to demand of the politicians some leadership. I won't blame the politician. I blame us. I blame the voter. I blame the consumer. If we don't see it and we don't demand anything better, this will be the state of affairs. A plane ticket to Las Vegas, Nevada from Phoenix, Arizona does not cost $656. It's roughly a 3.5-hour drive. That an airline feels confident enough to charge as much and that people are paying it. My God, inflation is bullshit.
Act 2. Political ads aren't for you, dear voter. They are for the donors.
It doesn't matter where you live. Political ads during an election cycle are just a fact of life. And those ads are generally some of the dumbest things that you will ever see on television. Laughably stupid. Occasionally, though, you'll have what is the solar eclipse of stupid political ads. You'll have a race that actually can tilt the national landscape on the federal level, whether it be the Senate or the House of Representatives. It's not just that there's a very close margin between the parties for, let's say, the Senate or for, let's say, the House. You're also in a state where the political parties believe that each of their candidates can actually win. Particularly for the Senate, the math is quite simple. There's only 100 seats. If it's close in margin, that is to say, one party holds just a slim majority in the Senate, and you believe that you can actually turn the majority out of that 100 by winning a few seats, and you identify the states where you think you've got a good shot to turn over those seats, the money comes pouring in for political ads, whether it be on television, whether it be in print, whether it be on social media. If you've lived long enough, no matter where you live, you've probably had that eclipse land on your head. And guess what, folks? Living in the state of Arizona, with the Senate as close as it is, the Republicans believing that they can actually flip it in the year of our Lord, 2022, the money has come pouring in for the Senate race. Blake Masters, the Republican, versus Mark Kelly, the Democrat. Now, this piece is not to speak in any way, shape, or form on the merits of the candidates, on whether or not I believe one candidate will be victorious over the other. What's interesting is how the flood of money gets spent. If you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know that I'm a markets guy. I believe in markets. Things don't happen outside of market influences. If you see television ads promoting a product and you watch that television ad and you say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, that ad is so stupid, it actually turns me off from ever buying that product. And you see that ad over and over and over again. You are the outlier. The market has spoken. Whatever product, whatever service, whatever company is advertising, they wouldn't continue to play the ad. They wouldn't continue to spend the money if that wasn't getting some sort of response, some sort of positive response. Would I ever shop at Old Navy? Hell to the no. It has the worst advertising on television. Don't get in front of me and just dance. That television ad does well. It does well enough that you see it over and over and over again. The people who would buy such clothing clearly enjoy that advertisement. Why do I go to such great lengths to make that point? That the terrible things that you see on the television, in print, on the social media, why do I make a point of telling you that makes you an outlier? Because you wouldn't continue to see it if it didn't actually have a positive effect on some segment of the marketplace. Those ads are targeted for particular consumers, and they have the desired effect on those particular consumers. Namely, I'm going to go and buy service. I'm going to go and buy product. I'm going to support company. When you look at the political ads that are smeared across the media landscape in anticipation of an election, you really have to wonder who they are marketing to. And follow me here. It's easy to say, well, people are stupid and they're easily influenced by stupidity, and that's why those ads are so effective. Yes, that on its face makes sense. But dig a little deeper. Let's look at it from below instead of above, dear listener. Looking at it from above, it's let's be in judgment. Let's look at people. Let's say that they're dumb. Let's see how many of those ads are dumb. It's a good 100%. So the dumb ads influence the dumb people. Well, look at how polarized the political climate is today. It's very often, and I think in your personal life, dear listener, you can confirm as much, the people that you know, even if they're not what you would call dumb or ignorant, they're very entrenched in their political views. It's not as if one of these political ads is going to turn their vote on a politician or on an issue. I've maintained here on this very podcast, and I will maintain right now, there is no difference between the political parties, and they all rely on identity politics to try to separate us, to try to get us into tribes, and then affiliate with that candidate. This candidate is part of this tribe. Vote for this candidate. How many independents are out there? And if you are an independent, as I would qualify myself, how influential are some of these stupid political ads? Have you ever considered as much, dear listener? If you are an independent and you see those political ads, are you not immediately turned off? Is there any of those ads that has influenced your opinion on an issue or on a political candidate? Let's quickly recap. Stupid ads. Stupid people generally are entrenched in their stupid beliefs. Stupid belief translates to vote, and there is nothing that's going to change that vote, even where you do not believe the people in your life, the people in your community, the people in your state to be stupid or ignorant. These people too are also entrenched in their political beliefs, their political views. They know who they're going to vote for. They know who they are not going to vote for. At best, the ads are trying to market to independents who are generally not buying in to all the tribal bullshit, and the ads are geared towards tribalism. Who are these ads actually for? They're not like your typical car or truck ad. They're not like your typical insurance ad. They're not like an advertisement that you would see for the clothier Old Navy. Here is what's dawned on me. And this, of course, is just a theory. I think the theory, I feel the theory, I believe the theory is backed up by what we know of human nature, dear listener. There's very few people that can donate enough money, that can contribute to political PACs, that contribute to political parties, that contribute to the individual candidates in order to create this type of advertising, in order to influence the social media landscape with these ads. Have you ever heard the phrase a good salesman or a good salesperson in the 21st century, of course, take out the gender? Have you ever heard the phrase a good salesperson does not sell to themselves? You don't sell to you. You don't tell a prospect, hey, this is what's so great about the product, and then essentially espouse all the things that you like about the product. You're trying to identify the need in the prospect, and then you sell the product to fill the need to that prospect. That's how you sell a prospect instead of trying to sell yourself. That's not how political ads operate. Political ads are this unique animal whereby they are created, they're crafted They market to the likes, the dislikes. They are part of the tastes of the actual donor class, of the people who are donating to have these ads created. Political ads are the ultimate salesperson selling to themselves. And it's perfect because it's very consistent not only with the political process, but with the government itself. As you should know, dear listener, and I believe many of you do, when a government agency gets an allocation of money in their budget for the fiscal year, they know damn well they've got to spend every single dollar, if not exceed their budget, in order to get that much money or more for the next fiscal year. You never have a budget surplus. Whatever money you get, you have to spend. When it comes to these PACs, particularly the ones that are created for political marketing, for digital marketing, social media, print, advertising on television, whatever dollar they have, that dollar has to get spent. In addition, once the dollar is spent, if there's any time left, there needs to be more dollars for additional advertising, whether or not to run the same ads or to create new ads. So the advertising doesn't necessarily have to meet the demands, the needs, the wants of the consumer, of the voter. It has to meet the demands, the needs, the wants of the donor. I'm not going to continue to donate. I'm not going to continue to feed this animal with money unless I see the kind of ads that appeal to me. If I see an advertising campaign that I disagree with after donating $10 million, and you come back to me and say, we need another $10 million, you say, rightfully, and it doesn't matter what political party you are, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what race you are. I gave you $10 million. I didn't like what you did with it. You want another $10 million. Go fuck yourself. Doesn't it make sense? Doesn't that make sense, dear listener? So when we look at our fellow citizens and we say, you're stupid, and you want to know how I know you're stupid? Because look at all these political ads. And clearly, they're having an effect on someone because they wouldn't exist but for the fact that they're influencing some portion of the voter population to vote one way or another. Ipso facto, you're stupid. And here, listen to the language that I've used throughout the course of this segment. Shockingly enough, once you look at it from below instead of above, what you realize is your fellow citizens aren't stupid. Many of them may be pig-headed in that they are entrenched in their political views, and nothing that you say or anyone else can say is going to change those views and going to change those votes. That doesn't make them stupid. What you realize, and what is so profound and yet troubling at the same time, I mean, this is a true paradox, truly profound, truly troubling. Those political ads are for the donors. And the donors are donating tens of millions of dollars in order to create them. People who are what we look at as the pinnacle of human existence, whether that be in media or sports, politics, religion, and particularly business. These are the people who are donating the money to get what are laughably stupid political ads that wouldn't appeal to the dumbest, the most base, the most rudimentary of American voters. Donald Trump is a great example of this. Let's not look at Trump, the President of the United States. Let's look at Trump 10 years ago, a man who clearly gave money to political causes. Now, did he give as much money as he claims to have given? Of course he didn't. That's part of his charm. That's part of his persona, to exaggerate, if not, frankly, flat out lie about how much money he ever donated to any political cause. Look at Donald Trump as a contributor, as a patron, as a donor. What kind of ad would appeal to one Donald Trump? It would be the dumbest, the basest, the stupidest ad that you could create. Marjorie Taylor Greene is in the United States Congress. What kind of political ad do you think would appeal to her? What kind of political ad do you think would appeal to the people who actually support her, but more than that, believe in her? I know when you were listening to this segment at the beginning, dear listener, you didn't think this was going to turn around and be a kumbaya moment, embracing your fellow citizens across the country, rather than seeing them as perpetrators of this political nonsense, being victims of it. But here we are. Your countrymen are not the impetus for these stupid political ads. It's the donors themselves. It's salespeople selling to themselves. And if they don't see what they want to see, they're not going to donate anymore. And the people that are making those ads know damn well that every dollar that they get is a dollar that has to be spent. It certainly puts into a different perspective the acumen, the intelligence, the ingenuity, the creativity necessary to garner, to amass, to build this massive wealth such that you have enough money to go out and donate $10 million, maybe $20 million to a political action committee to create an ad where a politician shoots a gun at something, blows something up. A person worth $50 million appearing in a flannel shirt and blue jeans. The entire industry works completely in service to itself, to its own donors. Once you realize that, once that epiphany occurs, you actually can have a hell of a lot of sympathy, dear listener, for your fellow countrymen, whether or not they're on the same side of the political aisle as you, whether or not they agree with the same positions that you do. I remember watching this documentary about the Korean War. I believe it was on PBS. I believe it was actually a Ken Burns documentary. It was absolutely amazing. And they're talking to this American soldier who is in the mountains of North Korea when the Chinese counterattacked and was in that frozen environment. If you have any idea what I'm talking about, the mountains of North Korea being some of the highest mountains in the world, the temperatures were negative 50, and the United States and its Korean allies were basically pushing the North Korean army into China and was going to push well into China. The Chinese counterattack, and there was a massive battle that went on for weeks in those mountains. And this American soldier is asked about his Chinese counterparts after all these years, and what would he do if he was confronted with one of the enemy soldiers who had actually survived that battle today. And he said, I would go up and hug the man. I would give him a hug because he suffered through the same thing that I did. He was up in those mountains, confused, freezing to death, fighting for his life. We may look at each other as enemies, dear listener, but when it comes to the election cycle and it comes to these political ads, we are all brothers and sisters, scared, confused, and fighting for our sanity.
Act 3. Take your victory lap, Tennessee fanboy.
Tennessee beats Alabama 52-49 in a thrilling game, a last-second field goal. And fanboy is happy. The first time Tennessee has beat Alabama since Nick Saban took over as head coach. The most points given up by a Nick Saban defense in college football, in his college football coaching career. The most points given up by Alabama since 1907, over 100 years. I reveled in the goalpost coming down, although there was a part of me that said, hey, act like you've been there before. But given the fact that it'd been, 20 years or close to it since Tennessee had been there before, the goalpost coming down, well, it wasn't that inappropriate. Let the kids have some fun. Speaking of kids, thinking about how long it's been since Tennessee has beat Alabama. If you were a kid growing up in the state of Tennessee, you literally don't have any memory of the University of Tennessee beating the University of Alabama. That's how long it's been. You can be an 18-year-old freshman or a 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Tennessee, and Tennessee has never beat Alabama. Yeah, the goalpost should have come down. I'm proud of myself in that throughout the course of that game, I only exclaimed profanities twice and really didn't stomp around, didn't get so emotionally overwrought by what was a roller coaster ride of a football game. Strangely, or maybe a sign of maturity, maybe a sign of growth, the exclamation of profanities was actually in support of the University of Tennessee. It was on two of the long touchdown passes that Hendon Hooker threw, those types of plays that you've seen an Auburn or a Georgia or a Clemson make on the Alabama defense. It's been years since the Tennessee Volunteers have done something like that. I got what I wanted. I got a football game that I was actually able to watch in the third and fourth quarter. I was glued to the television set in that fourth quarter as the game went back and forth. With Tennessee coming out on top, I couldn't ask for anything more. A few notes on the game. Yes, when Tennessee turned the ball over, when Alabama had that scoop and score on defense, I thought, here it comes again. A Tennessee football team that's going to take Alabama deep into the fourth quarter, game tied or the game within one score favoring one team or the other. Alabama does what Alabama does, gets a score on defense, special teams faux pas by the Volunteers, or a special teams run back by the Alabama Crimson Tide, a long touchdown drive by their offense. The game gets put away. Disappointment for yet another year. With what I believe was only 4 minutes left in the game, Alabama getting that scoop and score, that was the script. That's what it looked like. Tennessee plays hard. They play a close game. They make one mistake near the end of the game. Alabama capitalizes. Alabama wins again. Tennessee driving the length of the field, aided, mind you, by some Alabama penalties, to score a tying touchdown. And then with 15 seconds left in the game, being able to drive approximately 45 or 50 yards to get the game-winning field goal, that broke the script. This is a Tennessee offense that is actually getting better in every single game. It didn't look great at the beginning of the season. Playing a ranked Pitt team in Pittsburgh, Tennessee missed a number of offensive opportunities. That game was much closer than it needed to be, and that was simply because the offense wasn't clicking on all cylinders. Against LSU last week and the University of Alabama this week, that offense is clicking on all cylinders. One might think, dear listener, that Fanboy is going to go on to predict the University of Tennessee playing in the college football playoff, winning the national championship. With the offense as capable and as powerful as it is, I don't rule it out. There's one small issue, though, that the University of Tennessee football team is going to have to correct if they're going to have any chance against the University of Georgia at Georgia, much less, very likely, if they can win that game in Georgia, matching up with Alabama again in the SEC championship game. Tennessee just so happens to have the worst pass defense in the SEC. Let me repeat. Worst pass defense in the SEC. Vanderbilt plays in the SEC. Tennessee's pass defense worse than Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, a team that scores a lot of points and does so quickly, that allows the defense to be on the field for such a significant portion of the game because they do score so quickly, it's going to put a hell of a lot of pressure on the secondary. If a team can always stay in the game because they can throw the ball on Tennessee, you're going to see a lot of shootouts. It's going to be a lot of fun for the casual fan. For the Tennessee fan, there's going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth. A lot of taking the Lord's name in vain. I'd like to rub Alabama's face in shit having lost to Tennessee, but looking at the game and looking at the aggregate, I believe Alabama had 16 or 17 penalties. They had a turnover on special teams. They allowed multiple long pass plays to go for touchdowns. They allowed Tennessee to drive the length of the field. Yet at the end of the game, they had a chance to kick a field goal to win, and but for the fact that a back drops a football and then a wide receiver runs a bad route, their field goal attempt would probably have been closer to 40 or 39 yards as Tennessee's attempt was, and the kicker very likely would have made it. For as poorly as Alabama played, Tennessee won by the skin of their teeth, and Alabama actually had a chance to win the game, and if they had kicked that field goal with 15 seconds left, kicking off, I see very little chance, even for that high-powered Tennessee offense, to drive 60 or 70 yards in order to kick a field goal or throw a Hail Mary. I don't want to dwell on what needs to be corrected for the University of Tennessee's football team. I want to dwell on the win. I want to bask in the glory that is having beaten Florida and Alabama in the same season. And bask I shall, very likely, until the University of Tennessee goes to Athens, Georgia, to play the University of Georgia. As potent as Tennessee's offense is, Georgia's defense is stingy. If Tennessee goes into that game undefeated and Georgia goes into that game undefeated, Athens will be rocking, and that will be a very interesting environment to see if Tennessee's offense can perform at such peak efficiency, can be so explosive on the road in that type of crowd noise. Alabama, on the other hand, for their part, is going to tear through the SEC West, I have no doubt. I'd like to think that Ole Miss, as high-powered as their offense is going to give them a game. I just have a feeling that after a loss like this, with a team like Alabama, with a coach like Nick Saban, they are going to crush all opponents in their path in the SEC West onto yet another SEC title game. Whether it be Tennessee or whether it be Georgia, Alabama will be there waiting. And Alabama will still have the opportunity to play for a national championship. Tennessee may lose to Georgia. They may lose another game. The team may end up being a 10-3 or an 11-2 football team. And if so, no one will be able to deny the great win that they had in Knoxville over Alabama, one of the few teams in the SEC that's put another black mark on Nick Saban's resume. And with the offense that the University of Tennessee has, it shouldn't be that difficult, given the amount of money that that university is willing to spend to get a high-profile defensive coordinator to help bring in high-profile recruits to just shore up what is the worst pass defense in the SEC. It may exude from my voice. It is that most dangerous of emotions, optimism, hope, and I strangely don't have any reluctance feeling it. I actually believe that this is a turning point in the University of Tennessee football program. Josh Heupel was not the number one pick to be coach of the University of Tennessee football team, yet he may be the guy that we needed in order to put us back into that rarefied air, competing for an SEC title and an opportunity to play in the national championship playoff. The lesson, as always, dear listener, be open to possibilities. You may not get what you want. You may not get what you most desire. You may just get what you need. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.